Well, hello and welcome everybody. It's Matthew Rowe with Aspire Career Services. And today we're talking about effective communication skills in the workplace and also as a professional and the importance of it. So let's start off and let's just dive right in. So the first thing is why it matters. Why is it important to have effective communication in the workplace and as a professional? Why should I even want to get better at it? Why does it even matter? So the first thing is career advancement. So hopefully you're on here watching this and on the Aspire Hub because you've signed up for our services and you want to improve your career. You want to move forward in your career and you want to take control of your career. And effective communication does just that. And through our mentoring and our leadership development services, even through our chat with a mentor, we're going to give you these tools and resources to help you become more effective at communication, which once again, in turn, is going to help you advance in your career, whether it be in your industry, in a different industry, at your current employer, or even a different employer. We're going to be able to help give you tools and resources to grow and advance in your career through effective communication. The second thing is job satisfaction. So even where you're at now, or once again, where you would eventually like to be, is finding job satisfaction. Often we find that if someone effectively communicates well in the workplace, they have stronger relationships with their supervisor. They have stronger relationships with their peers. They have stronger relationships with employees below them if they are a leader. They have stronger just connections, period, within the organization. And oftentimes they find themselves being more effective inside of their role, meaning or leading to better job satisfaction overall. And then last but not least is once again relationship building, which ties into all of this. Um, Relationships are at the core of our ability to advance, to improve, to get better. Um, Surrounding yourself with individuals that help make you better and not tear you down. And the most effective way to do that is effective communication, building that trust, building those deeper connections. They find that people stay at their workplace a much longer if they have deeper connections with the people that they work with. So once again, effective communication is so critical to being able to do that. All right, let's talk about some core components here. So the first is verbal. Obviously, communication is the words coming out of your mouth. You That's probably the number one component, obviously, that we think about whenever we hear the word communication. But it's really a kind of smaller part of it. There's a lot more that goes into it. But verbal is definitely a very important part of the very important component to communication. Next is nonverbal. This is the one that gets grossly misunderstood or misvalued because our brain is actually processing at a much higher rate than we can even comprehend when it comes to body language. Some people are even at a higher rate where they're ultra sensitive to facial expressions, to stance, to posture, to where what someone's hands are doing. If I'm talking like this, that's very open and receptive, meaning I trust you. If I'm standing like this, that means I'm closed off and maybe I don't trust you, or I'm protecting myself, or I'm looking away, right? There's a whole lot of communication that happens when you're able to see someone. So nonverbal is probably one of those, once again, that get grossly misunderstood or misvalued. And then last is written. Um, Written is the way of the 21st century, whether it be through messaging, through emails, through text messages, through chat. Messaging and written communication, once again, is truly at the forefront of how we communicate in the 21st century. And I believe that it will continue to be. It's so vitally important that we're able to structure our sentences well, get our point across. So much time is wasted sending emails back and forth, trying to get on the same page, to understand what each other are trying to convey, versus just being able to communicate clearly and quickly and precisely in an email, and get that point across, or through any other messaging system. All right, let's talk about listening and speaking. So the first is active listening. What's the difference between active listening and just regular old listening, right? So active listening means that you're actually engaged in the words coming out of their mouth and trying to tie it to the context of the conversation. I always tell people the key to active listening is good question asking, and truly being curious. So there's a method that I use, and you can write this down if you'd like. But it's asking a good deep, open ended question first. And if you don't know the difference between an open ended question and a closed ended question, I'm going to give that to you really quickly right now. So, an open ended question encourages a free or open response, often requiring them to think before answering, and certain things like that. A closed ended question is a quantifiable response, meaning like blue, green, yellow, yes, no, orange, dog, cat, right? You're asking them something specific and it's a quantifiable response in return, versus asking what someone's thoughts are. So I can say, hey, how does it feel outside? And they might be like, hot. Or what's the weather like outside? Those are very borderline, meaning they could be open ended, but they could also be closed ended. Versus a sure way to get a close or an open ended question is saying, "Well, what are your thoughts? Or what do you think? Right? Or how do you feel about this?" It's going to give them an opportunity to really think and express themselves. So here's the method: is open an open-ended question that is deep, okay? Not a surface level, but a deep open-ended question, and then follow up with three follow-up questions based off their responses. Okay. So if you ask me, you know, um, describe to me what it would feel like to advance in your career the way you've always wanted to. And then I go on describing that. What you'd want to do is you'd want to listen actively for what I'm saying and attach to some of my answers and ask a follow-up question based off of that. And then what you'll do is you'll ask three follow-up questions based off their answers. And then after the third one, you're going to find common ground. So you're going to say something like, wow, I can't believe that is how you feel. Like, 2 years ago, that's exactly where I was at. And once again, you're going to find common ground and relate to them. So that's truly the key to active listening is good question asking, and not being afraid to be curious and truly understand what they're saying. Second is building confidence. Um, when you're listening and you're speaking, you gotta be confident in it. And here's the best way to become confident in speaking and listening is realizing that no one's naturally confident. And if they are, it's a facade, it's not real. Oftentimes, you might see someone that is just talking, 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 talking. You can't get them to stop. And you're like, oh my gosh, would this person be quiet? And you assume that they are extremely confident, right? And you're like, why can't I have that type of confidence? And in reality, they're just responding to the fear differently than you are, right? Your response to that fear of speaking or listening or being in that one-on-one situation is to shut down and not say anything. Their response to the fear is the opposite, right? They're actually speaking out of anxiety. So no one naturally just has this confidence and ability to speak unless you have a ton of practice at it. But even then, you still get nervous. So the number one thing is just realizing that everybody is nervous going into a conversation, and that's okay. And that will actually help you build confidence in it. Nonverbal cues, once again, body language, body language, body language. Be ultra aware of your body language and what you're thinking. People say all the time, "Fake it till you make it." I hate that terminology because it's not true. If you're faking it, people are going to know it, because you can't hide what's up in here. If you try to really, really hard, but the moment stress gets introduced into the situation, or the moment things change, you're going to revert back. And no matter, and if you're faking it, eventually it's going to come out through your body language. So once again, it's so important to be aware of your emotions, to be aware of how you're thinking, how you're feeling when you're communicating and or listening. and because it will come through your body language. Overcoming some barriers. So, what are some common barriers? Some common barriers are emotions, number one, um, dynamics, meaning that's just the mix of personalities and culture and the different dynamics that are inside of a group. And then also um, language. Language can be a huge barrier. And how do we overcome some of those barriers is really important. So when it comes to the language, is just being aware that if it's not their first language, it's okay if they take time and pause because they're not thinking, they're translating. And that's okay. Give them that confidence to be able to translate because they're probably already feeling rushed as it is. The other thing is be okay with their accent or the way that they're pronunciating something. It doesn't have to be perfect, and they're already self-conscious about it anyways. So if you're showing all over your face that you're like frustrated or you're like, oh my gosh, get it out, then you're just going to make it worse. Don't do that. Instead, be empathetic and understanding that if you were in their shoes, you'd be doing the exact same thing. If it was flip flopped and you were trying to speak in their first language, it would be in the inverse. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind. Emotions, you have to be aware of your own emotions. If you're highly heightened in your emotions, you have what's called your limbic system, and that's the system that's inside of your brain that controls the emotions or and even the fight or flight mode. So if that is being triggered, oftentimes your frontal lobe is being overridden by your limbic system, and your frontal lobe controls things like logic and reasoning. So, if your limbic system is firing and you're super emotional about something, it's not likely that you're going to be able to communicate well. So, always resolve or get through those emotions. And once again, this is where Aspire can come in. Is if you're going through emotions or you're going through something and you know that you need a moment before you communicate to that other party, once again, call us. That's what we're here for. Send us a chat, schedule a mentoring session with us, and we'd be happy to sit down and kind of work through those emotions with you. That's what we're here for. Up next is empathy and communication. And empathy is often confused with sympathy, but let me give you a really clear defining line. Empathy is the ability to communicate emotions without expressing them, right? So I can say, that made me sad versus being like, I'm really sad or that's sad, right? There's a difference. Either one, I'm expressing the emotion, the other one, I'm just communicating the emotion. So sometimes people just want empathy. And what that means is to recognize or affirm what they've said and an understanding or a general understanding of that emotion. And you can even connect with it. You can even be like, I've been in that same situation. And when I was in that situation, I felt sad as well. So I completely understand where you're coming from. But once again, if you start to take on that emotion, now you're going into the sympathy route. And there is a context for sympathy. But when you're trying to effectively communicate, if both become emotional, it really breaks down that ability, or it really puts up a barrier to communication. And then last is continuous improvement. If you think you're the coolest communicator out there, and you can't learn anything, or either that or you're extremely resistant to feedback and getting better, then you're really going to struggle. So you have to be okay with the idea that you can always improve your communication no matter what. All right, the role of feedback. So the importance of feedback is that's the only way to get better. Kind of like we were talking about the last point. If you want to get better, ask for feedback. People will willingly give it, and it's okay to give critical feedback, and it's okay to receive critical feedback. It's only going to help and not hurt. So when you're giving constructive feedback, it's critical that you stick with the facts, right? You stick with the information and you communicate it respectfully, okay, and calmly, and you do it through care. Because if you genuinely want that person to get better and you should genuinely care about their well-being, then that's going to come through in your communication. They're going to feel that. And then, of course, receiving feedback. So when you're receiving feedback, it's important to keep an open mind and once again realize that no one's perfect and it's okay to receive that feedback and get better. Here's the thing is that you're never going to be at a point where you don't need critical feedback. We're always going to be at a point in our career and in our professional and personal development where we need feedback in order to get better. So get used to receiving it, and it's okay. And I always tell people that if there's two or more people that truly, genuinely care about you that are saying the same thing, it's highly likely that that thing that they're saying is true and you should listen to it. All right, building relationships. Once again, this is the cornerstone of communication, in my opinion. Trust and transparency. That is the only way to honestly and truly build trust is through communication. Because communication, I'm sorry, trust is given and not earned. Meaning everybody has a trust threshold, and everybody's threshold is different. But once I reach your thrust or your threshold, you're going to give me your trust. And the only way to do that is for me to take an interest in you. The more you give me, the more you're going to trust me, right? And that's the same thing goes in the opposite direction. If you want to earn someone, I mean, rephrase. If you want to reach that threshold with that person, then you got to take the time to get to know them, ask them questions, and find out more about them. Well, we went backwards here, but that's okay. Become curious. And then also setting expectations. When it comes to relationships, oftentimes we don't set expectations or we don't communicate no sometimes, and that's okay too. It's okay to say no. It's okay to set boundaries and expectations in those relationships. And once often miscommunications happen because we don't do that. And then also become curious. Always become curious about the individual you're trying to build a relationship with. The more curious you are, the more you're going to build that trust and transparency, the better you're going to be able to set boundaries and expectations. And the quicker you're going to build deeper connections with those people around you. If you're trying to get them interested in you, you're gonna fail. Okay. The only way to build relationships is by taking an interest in them. When you take an interest in them, they're naturally going to take an interest in you, but you have to be the one to initiate it. All right. And that's it, guys. That is the end of the presentation of effective communication. I hope you guys have learned something. Don't forget to click down below and download the worksheet that goes along with this to really put into action what you've learned today. Thank you for choosing Aspire, and we'll see you soon.